So our topic today is the yoga of sleep and dreams. So how many of us do we think it's important to continue with yoga in our sleep? What relevance does sleep really have with yoga?
What's your mind use?
It's your?
What's your mind, mental state of mind?
It's your mental state of mind. And well, when you go to sleep, your frontal personality, your eyes, they are sort of pushed into abeyance. And Sri Aurobindo says that we are not one human being, but we are a spectrum of different planes of consciousness. We look like a human being here, but just the way there's the electromagnetic spectrum, we are spectrums of different sort of planes of consciousness. And typically, whatever plane of consciousness we have a link with during the day, we fall asleep linked to that plane of consciousness. The content of that plane of consciousness vis-a-vis you shows itself. So instead of me saying, I'll read in the words of Sri Aurobindo, and the mother have written tremendously about the importance of sleep and the importance of making it conscious. Otherwise, we may have achieved ground during the day, but we go to sleep and we again sink, and next day we've taken a back seat. So if the thread of yoga continues through our sleep, we don't have to take that kind of back seat again and again. So we come to Rumi's words, very beautiful. A shepherd comes every night from the land of absence. Land of absence means nothingness, emptiness of the Buddha. A shepherd comes every night from the land of absence, frees souls from the body and scatters them like camels. He guides them secretly back to the land of absence and places them lovingly in the pasture of his kindness. It's a poetic way of saying the shepherd is God, and every night he comes from the land of absence, frees the souls from the bodies and scatters them like camels. he guides them secretly back to the land of absence. So in our sleep, we have the swapna avastha, the state of dreams, and the susupti, which is this dreamless sleep state. And in that dreamless sleep state, we become one with the source. We become one with what is called the Satchidanand. We become one with what he calls here land of absence. So, and places them lovingly in the pasture of his kindness. But he covers their eyes and doesn't let them see the road. For this is a road divine, not the road of self and senses. So, if we just keep dreaming through the night and we don't touch that realm of dreamless sleep, we wake up very tired because we get rejuvenated in that little span that we touch dreamless sleep. So masters like the mother, she was known to be working late into the night, rest for just 2 hours, and that too it was completely conscious sleep. She used to go into this state, get her rest and come back. And that is why masters sleep so little, because they don't need to go through all the REM sleep and all that we go through. So now Satprem's words from Adventure of Consciousness. Not everyone is capable of consciously leaving his body or consciously widening his mind and vital, but many do so unconsciously in sleep. So many places, Mother and Sri Aurobindo and many texts on yoga say that it is important to develop the siddhi of being able to leave the body and coming back at will. So there's a very sweet story of Udar Pinto, where he kept hearing about this from Mother, that leave the body consciously at will and be able to come back. So one day he tried and he could get out of his body, and he floated out and he went to the ceiling and he saw that the top part of the fan hadn't been painted. So he made a note, these rascals, they've done a half-baked job. They've just painted the bottom and not the top part. And then he came back, but that's just a side story. But what Satprem is saying is, not everybody is capable of consciously leaving his body or consciously widening his mind and vital, but many do so unconsciously in sleep. Precisely when the little eyes of the frontal being are less of a hindrance. If you have the PDF on your phone, you can follow. Are less of a hindrance and less thoroughly absorbed in their superficial preoccupations. Sleep then is the first tool. It can become conscious, increasingly conscious, until we become sufficiently developed to be continuously conscious on this side and on the other, until sleep and death too are no longer a return to the vegetative state or a dispersion into our natural constituents, but simply a passage from one mode of consciousness to another. Thus there exists an infinite gradation of coexistence, simultaneous realities, into which sleep opens a natural window. As Sri Aurobindo puts it, a gradation of planes of consciousness ranging without break from pure matter to pure spirit, subtle physical, mental, vital, supramental. Everything takes place within these planes, our life, our sleep, our death. There is nowhere to go outside them. And not only is everything taking place there, but everything coexists there without any separation. So he's saying that there are these planes, the vital plane, the mental plane, the subtle physical, and they are simultaneously existing. But whichever plane our consciousness is identified, we are aware of only that. But when you go to sleep, you can be in any one of these planes. So you can have dreams from the vital plane, you can have dreams from the mental plane, You can have intuitive dreams from the higher mind plane and so on. So that's why it's very important what state of mind you, because if you fall asleep in your vital, it's likely that throughout the night, whatever is the content of your vital will come out. But if you link with the mother and sleep and invite her to flow in, then it's possible that sleep can open you up to great guidance, great intuition. And in fact, it's interesting, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he's given many methods to quieten the mind. And one method, he said, is if you have a mystical dream experience and you wake up and you just contemplate it, it can take you to a higher state of awareness. Like Lao Tzu is supposed to have a dream that he was a butterfly. So he woke up and meditated hours contemplating, am I Lao Tzu who had a dream that he was a butterfly, or am I a butterfly who's dreaming just now that I'm Lao Tzu? So dreams can give you beautiful thoughts of opening like that. Or somebody I knew had a beautiful dream where she was sitting on the mother's lap, the picture which is at the meditation room with her arms around the mother, and just like a mantra telling the mother, I love you, I love you, I love you. And she said it was such a beautiful dream that for days I got up and meditated on it and I'd get into that beautiful state. So depending on the last thought you fall asleep with, that's the entry point to the place. So it's very important to not sleep, definitely be off screens at least half an hour before you sleep. Otherwise, whatever you've just seen is going to play on your mind. And very important to at least 5 minutes quieten your mind, connect with the mother, read something uplifting, and then fall asleep. And particularly to fall asleep with a will that make me conscious in my sleep. Because if I haven't lived the day very consciously, my night will be unconscious. My night is very unconscious when I'm completely identified with the dream. For example, if the dream is a scary dream and I'm really so scared that even in my physical body, my sympathetic nervous system kicks in, my heart beats, all that, then I'm very unconscious because I've completely identified with the dream. But lucid dreaming is training your consciousness to be aware that you are dreaming. So I always speak what I've been practicing. So I've been practicing this quite a bit during the past few weeks, and one night there was a certain point where I had to cross a dangerous thing in my dream, and I remember thinking, I don't want to go there, it's a dream, I'm going to wake up. And I woke up from it. So that's what lucid dreaming is, when you're conscious in a dream that you are dreaming, and you don't, or you can change the direction of the dream. Like a friend told me her daughter, she's born with this gift. If she'll wake her up, the daughter will say that, wait ma, I'm having a dream, I'll complete it and I'll come back. And she'll go to sleep and then she'll come out and say, I completed the dream. So the mother said, wow, you can do that, but that's just something she's born with. So if we live our day consciously, only then our nights will be conscious. But if see, every thought you're having is a dream in a waking state, isn't it? And if you're identified with your thoughts, you're going to be identified with the dreams. But if the witness poise in a waking state is cultivated, where you're able to stand back and observe your thoughts, at night you will be able to know a dream is a dream without identification. Okay. So sleep then is a first tool. It can become conscious, increasingly conscious, until we become sufficiently developed to be continuously conscious on this side and on the other, until sleep and death too are no longer a return to the vegetative state or a dispersion into our natural constituents, but simply a passage from one mode of consciousness to another. Thus, there exists an infinite gradation of coexistence, simultaneous realities. As Sri Aurobindo puts it, a gradation of planes of consciousness ranging without break from pure matter to pure spirit. Everything takes place within these planes: our sleep, our life, our death. When we are awake, we receive mental or vital vibrations which express themselves as certain symbols, certain ways of seeing, of understanding, or living. When we are asleep or dead, we receive the same mental, vital, or other vibrations which express themselves as other symbols, other ways of seeing, understanding, or living the same reality. In every case, the key to our existence here or elsewhere is always our capacity of consciousness. If we are unconscious in our life, we will be unconscious in every way. Death will be really a death and sleep really a torpor. Becoming conscious of these various degrees of reality is therefore a fundamental task. So Sri Aurobindo is saying death is just another level of sleep. If you live consciously, you'll sleep consciously, you'll die consciously. But if you live unconsciously, that unconsciousness goes to everything else. Once we have done this work integrally, the artificial demarcation lines that used to separate our various modes of existence will collapse, and we will pass without interruption, without any gap of consciousness, from life to sleep to death, or more precisely, there will no longer be death or sleep as we understand them, but different ways of continuously perceiving the total reality. And perhaps finally an integral consciousness that will perceive everything simultaneously. Our evolution is not over. Death is not a denial of life, but a process of life. As a rule, the places or planes we go to in sleep or in death are those with which we have already built a link. But at this elementary stage, although the consciousness may be mentally very refined and cultivated, it is not really individualized. It thinks more or less what everybody else thinks, feels what everybody else feels, and lives what everybody else lives. It is only a temporary aggregate. Those only continue is that of the body around which everything revolves. In this embryonic state then, when it falls asleep, the consciousness sinks back into the subconscient. We use the word subconscient as Sri Aurobindo does in its etymological sense, meaning that which is historically subconscious, our past, not below the level of our waking consciousness, but below the stage of evolution as in an animal or a plant. So very often when we sink into the subconscient, our weaknesses are exaggerated in our dreams. For example, if we are scared in a waking state and we've sunken into the subconscient, we'll be much more scared in our dreams. If we are angry, we'll be much more angry, or whatever. Everything dark is exaggeratedly dark in the subconscious. So if we've sunk to the subconscious and we are dreaming from there, then that tends to happen. According to the development of our consciousness, there are many degrees in this new sleep, from the rare spasmodic flashes we may have on one plane or another, to a continuous vision, master of itself, capable of moving at will from low to high and from high to low as it pleases. Here again, everything depends on our waking consciousness. By affinity, we normally go to the planes with which we have established a link, the vital, mental, or other vibrations which we have accepted, and which in us express themselves as ideals, aspirations, desires, baseness, or nobility, constitute this link. And when we go out of our body, we go to their source, an extraordinarily vivid and striking source, besides which our mental vital expressions in their physical world seem poor and almost abstract. So, the dream world in the Mandukya Upanishad is called the Teja state, the luminous state, because there everything is brighter than in our normal state. So that's what Sri Aurobindo is saying here. It is clearly impossible to describe these worlds in a few pages or even in several volumes. We might as well describe the earth after a glimpse of Normandy. Besides, we do not intend to describe them, but simply to give a few clues to help the seeker cross-check with his own experience. But how can we remember our sleep? That is the million-dollar question. For most people, it's a total blank. Most people will say, but I didn't only have any dreams. We had dreams, but we were unconscious. And because we haven't made a conscious link with that particular plane in which dreams came, we don't remember it. Because only if you made a link with that plane in the waking state will you remember it. There are, in fact, a number of links or bridges, as Mother calls them, as though we were made of a series of countries connected to one another by bridges. So all these planes of consciousness are countries connected to one another by bridges. Thus, we may easily recollect some parts of our being and their travels, while others remain in oblivion for lack of a bridge to the rest of our consciousness. When we cross this void or this poorly trained part of the consciousness, we forget, which is what generally happens to those who go into ecstasy. So if you go into a trance, you have no memory of it. Same thing happens in sleep. In principle, a sufficiently developed being travels through the whole range of planes of consciousness in his or her sleep and goes right up to the supreme light of the Spirit Satchidananda. All of us, that is. Unconsciously more often than not, but those few minutes are the true sleep, the true rest in the absolute relaxation of joy and light. Sri Aurobindo used to say that the real purpose of sleep is to return spontaneously to the source and re-immerse oneself in it. From there, we slowly come down again through all the planes, mind, vital, subtle, physical and subconscious. So if I've fallen asleep in the vital to reach the superconscious, I'll have to, in my sleep, from the vital go to mental, to the higher mental, finally to the supramental Satchidanand. And when I'm coming back, I have to come back through all these. Now, my waking consciousness doesn't have a bridge to these worlds or planes of consciousness. I will not remember what I dreamt of on that plane. There are also many zones within each plane, each with its particular bridge. The chief difficulty is to build the very first bridge, the one to the external waking consciousness. That's the last, right? The waking consciousness is the last consciousness, but usually we don't even have a bridge to that. So when our eyes open, we just don't remember anything. And the only way is to remain completely still and silent upon waking. Now pay great attention to what is being said next. If we turn over or move, everything evaporates. Or rather, the great lake of sleep is all ruffled with little ripples, and we can no longer make out anything. And if we begin to think, then it is not ripples but muddy swirls that veil everything. Thought has no place in this affair. It is not with the mind that we must try to remember. We must gaze steadily at the vast, quiet lake. So here it's a metaphor. Of course, there's no lake, but she's saying that when you wake up, just remain still, as if that waking state is a vast, quiet lake. And we must gaze steadily at the vast, quiet lake as in an objectless but very sustained contemplation, as if the sheer pointedness of our gaze had to pierce this dark blue depth. If we persevere long enough, we suddenly see a picture float before our eyes, or maybe just a faint outline, like the scent of a faraway land laden with fragrance, very familiar but elusive. At this point, we must not jump at it, for it would immediately vanish, but let it gradually grow more precise of its own accord. Let it take shape until we recapture a whole scene. In principle, we have firmly grasped the thread. We only have to pull it slowly without trying to think or understand. Understanding will come afterwards. If we start interpreting before we have done, we cut off the communication. And the thread will lead us from one country to another, from one memory to another. Sometimes we remain stuck for years at the same point on the path, as if a memory gap stopped us getting past. To build the missing link, we can do little else than be patient and keep at it again and again. If we persist, the path will eventually open up as in a virgin forest. So, what is being said is that the moment you wake up, don't turn. Train your mind, put a will to remain still, and try to remember the last dream you had. It's a great help to journal it the first thing in the morning, because as you write, you'll remember more. And often you'll feel that, okay, it's such a mundane dream, there's nothing to really journal in it. But dream has a very different kind of symbology. And just to give you an example, one night I woke up with a feeling that I'd had a very, very mundane dream, and I thought there's nothing thunderous in it to journal. But when I journaled it, I thought the dream was that I'm going through a dark forest and I have a fire torch, and then I see a group of young people, and they also want to go through the forest, so I'm sharing my torchlight with them. We go through the forest, I reach a friend's house, we watch a movie, so very mundane things. And then I see a piece of paper on which there was a question, psychic being, question mark, psychic being, question mark, psychic being, question mark, and yes. So when I'd written the dream out, I said, wow, the torch represents the psychic being, the forest represents the subconscious, and I'm taking some young people along the journey. But if I'd not written it down, it would have just passed by as something very mundane. So dreams have their own symbology and their own language, which once you write down, it will become clear to you. So, but trying to recapture dreams when we wake up is not the only method. We can also concentrate at night before going to sleep with a will to remember and to wake up at fixed intervals once or twice in the night, so as to catch the thread at different levels. So at different periods of the night, you're on different planes of consciousness. So there are people who wake up every 2 hours. They've trained themselves to jot down their dreams, go back to sleep, again sleep. Every time they wake up, they jot down their dreams. But I don't know, at least maybe that's a little difficult, but at least whenever you wake up to go to the loo or whatever, it's nice if you try and remember what you dream and write it down. But trying to recapture dreams when we wake up is not the only method. We can also concentrate at night before going to sleep with a will to remember and to wake up at fixed intervals once or twice in the night, so as to catch the thread at different levels. Why do we need to catch the thread at different levels? Because, Tushar? Yes, and each hour of the night we are in different planes, and unless we are awake in each plane, we won't catch what's happening over there. The method is particularly effective. We all know that we only have to want to wake up at a given time for the inner clock to work perfectly, almost to the minute. This is called making a formation to your subconscious mind. In this huge field of experience, we can only stress a few general practical points which will strike the seeker at the beginning of his investigation. First of all, we must clearly distinguish between ordinary subconscious dreams and experiences. Experiences are not dreams, although we have a habit of confusing everything. They are real events in which we have participated on one plane or another. So some dreams are just things you've suppressed in your vital or subconscious coming up, but some dreams are actual experiences, and Satprem says we have to be able to distinguish between them. They are distinguished from ordinary dreams by their special intensity. All events of the outer physical world, however exceptional, seem pale in comparison. They leave a deep impression and a memory more vivid than any of our memories on earth, as though we had suddenly struck a richer mode of existence. Not necessarily richer in its external aspect or colors, although these may have astonishing brightness, especially in the vital, but richer in its content. When the seeker wakes up with this overwhelming impression of having bathed in a world charged with signs that have more than one significance at a time, the events of our physical world rarely signify more than one thing at a time, and seem so charged with invisible ramifications and depths upon depths that one could contemplate them for a long time without exhausting their meaning. But when he has witnessed or participated in certain scenes that seem infinitely more real than our physical senses, which are always flat, as if they immediately hit a hard and somewhat photographic background, then he will know he has had a real experience and not a dream. So in the PDF, I want you to go to the third last page. This is a passage from a delightful book called The Surrender Experiment. You all should pick it up, by Michael Singer, where this seeker just makes an experiment with life where he says yes to everything. And there was a whole series of awakenings that led him to this moment. And just saying yes, this is his experiment, the surrender experiment. So there was one bizarre time when someone came and built a house on his land, and all his reactions came up. How can you do? The girl said that I'm just building it on your land, I'm not claiming it. When I leave, it's yours. But he still wouldn't, but he had made a commitment that I will say yes to everything that happens. And he was one of the, not a believer, he was an intellectual. So he wasn't doing it out of faith, he was doing it as his commitment to his experiment. So however much he wanted to scream no, he said yes. He calmed himself down and went and helped her build it. And in time to come, that same house that was built was part of the community. I mean, it was, everything was showing him that life had its own intelligence, and when he just says yes and flows with it, he finds that life is even more ambitious for him in the right way than he is. So this was about a dream he had. So there was a time in Michael's life when he had a very, very regimented spiritual discipline, meditating hours on end, not meeting anyone, and he felt he had experienced great heights, great silences, but kept feeling something wasn't there. So he said, I'll do even more disciplined practice and I'll get there. And at that moment, he has this dream. I would have gone on like that extreme ascetic discipline during my entire stay, if it not for a dream I had. I hardly ever dreamt, and when I did, the dreams didn't seem to have any deep significance. One night, I had a phenomenal lucid dream that had a profound effect on me. I dreamt that I was doing intensely focused Zen walking. I was very, very consciously bejeweled, placing one foot in front of the other as I slowly headed towards the mouth of a cave. I entered the cave without incident and proceeded into the darkness that stretched before me. When it became very dark, I picked up a wooden torch mounted on the side of the cave. I lit it and continued as before. I noticed that the air was getting thinner and thinner the deeper I went into the cave. There was an almost frighteningly strong sense of purpose. I was going to explore deep into this unknown cave until I found what I was looking for. Nothing was going to stop me. I began to see a faint light far off in the distance. Not a single thought passed through my mind, yet I intuitively knew that was where I was going. As I approached, I could see that the light was coming from above and shining down into the cave. The closer I got to the source of the light, the thinner the air became. I could hardly breathe. But I kept going on. The experience was similar to what had been happening in my practices. In my meditations, the deeper I went, the more my breath would slow down until eventually it would naturally stop flowing. We've experienced that sometimes. When we are in very deep meditation, our breath stops. I don't know how long I would stay in that breathless state, but I would come back and gasp for air. At some point, my walk through this cave felt just like that stage of my meditations. I was almost there. I could see the streaming rays of light pouring into the cave floor just in front of me. I felt as though I would collapse from the lack of oxygen, but I found the will to take the final step into the light. In an instant, I was completely bathed in a flood of blinding light. I turned upwards to climb into the light, but my hands hit a metal grate on the roof of the cave. There was no way out from there. Not a thought entered my mind. Not a sigh left my lips. With the same steely sense of purpose that had led me into this cave, I turned and began to walk back out. There was simply the knowing I would have to find another way. So what had the dream told him? What had it told him?
Alternate ways.
Yes, that his way of pushing hard with ascetic discipline, he'd not go further. He'd be stuck. He had to find another way. I woke from that dream a changed person. My way of thinking had been transformed at a very profound level. For the first time, I questioned whether more and more discipline was going to take me where I so desperately wanted to go. Sitting alone in my van that morning, I knew the answer was no. My path to true freedom was subtler than simply requiring a tighter grip. Something much wiser than me had reached into my psyche that night and rearranged my entire relationship with myself. I no longer saw the lower aspect of myself with all his personal issues and melodramas as the enemy that had to be destroyed. I looked at him now with a new understanding. I needed to use all these disturbed personal energies for my ascent. It was perfectly clear to me that since he was the problem, he was also the solution. I actually felt a tinge of compassion towards the struggling person within me. I would later come to learn that the Bhagavad Gita says that one should raise the small self with a small s to self with a capital S, not trample down the self. That is completely integral yoga. I had been trampling down my personal self in the name of getting free from his humanness. I now needed to learn how to raise those energies up to assist me on the journey. So some dreams like this can be quite life-changing, but if we haven't learned to remember, our wisdom self gives us these dreams, but when we wake up we forget. So it's really quite a loss. Our sleep state is a treasure house of guidance from eternity, and if we learn to sort of build those bridges and remember our dream, we can greatly accelerate our sadhana. So Sri Aurobindo writes about it beautifully in Savitri, page 120. Unreal seeming, yet more real than life, happier than happiness, truer than things true. If dreams these were or captured images, dreams truth made false earth's vain realities. In a swift eternal moment fix there live, or ever recalled come back to longing eyes, calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace. If you just remember one dream like this, it kind of gives you a high for days after, because it's not just a dream, you've actually been taken to that plane of consciousness. In swift eternal moment fix there live, or ever recalled come back to longing eyes, calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace, oceans and rivers of the mirth of God, and griefless countries under purple suns. This, once a star of bright remote idea, or imagination's comet trail of dream, took now a close shape of reality. The gulf between dream truth, earth fact was crossed. The wonder worlds of life were dreams no more. His vision made all they unveiled his own. Its own, their scenes, their happenings met his eyes and heart, and smote them with pure loveliness and bliss. A breathless summit region drew his gaze, whose boundaries jutted into a sky of self and dipped towards a strange ethereal base. The quintessence glowed of life's supreme delight on a spiritual and mysterious peak. Only a miracle's high transfiguring line divided life from the formless infinite and sheltered time against eternity. Further, from Adventure of Consciousness, for example, we may have had a spell of depression that day, or a fit of rage, or a movement of revolt, a sexual obsession, and so on. Or take an example of a seemingly different order. We may have tripped 2 or 3 times and almost broken our leg. Or we may have a bout of fever, and we notice that each of these small commonplace incidents is exactly related to another, often more symbolic incident, symbolic because it is not the precise fact, but a mental transcription when we wake up, which we experience the preceding night. We were attacked in a dream by some enemy, or we were involved in an unhappy episode, or else we saw something precisely, all the details surrounding the psychological scene of the day. It would indeed seem, that someone in us is wide awake and very concerned with making us lay our finger on all the wise and hidden mechanisms of our psychological life, all the reasons for our falls or our progress. So just to share something, years ago, many years ago, I'd had a dream that my brother was in a car and he met with an accident and he died. So he was abroad, so I called him up and I told him about this, and he just laughed. It's only a dream, no big deal. But for me, I've never taken my dreams very lightly. So I really did my own thing, really prayed to Mother and really offered the dream to her. Few days later, he called me and said his car had met with an accident and it was smashed to pieces, but he hadn't got a scratched. So it seemed like I was given the dream so that I could do whatever I could to change the course of circumstances. So that's what Satprem's saying here. It would indeed seem that someone in us is wide awake even when we sleep and very concerned with making us lay our finger on all the wise and hidden mechanisms of our psychological life, all the reasons for our falls or our progress. So let's do a little exercise I always do. If I've had an untoward dream, I always wake up and do this, and I feel I'm inviting Mother's light into it. So let's do it. Let's sit up straight. So if you can remember any one nightmare you've had, so visualize the nightmare playing in front of your eyes, and visualize the Mother or whoever your highest reverence is high up in the ceiling with her hands raised in blessing. And visualize two shafts of golden light coming from her palms, one into you as you sit here, and one into the image of the dream playing before your eyes. Inhale, let your attention go back to her hand raised in blessing. Exhale, two simultaneous shafts of golden light descending into you and into the dream. Why into you also? Because you are the whole spectrum of planes from which these dreams arise. For the dream to heal, you have to heal as well. So right now, 12 breaths like that. And slowly open your eyes after your 12th breath. For conversely, we may have the premonition of all the happy psychological movements that translate the next day into a progress and opening of consciousness, a sense of lightness and inner widening. And we remember that the previous night we had seen a light or an ascent or the crumbling of a wall of a house, symbolizing our resistances on some mental constructions that enclosed us. We are all the more struck by these premonitions as they are usually not associated with events we regard as important on our physical plane, like the death of a relative or some worldly achievement, but with perfectly trivial details outwardly unimportant, yet always very helpful for our inner progress. This is the sign that our consciousness is developing. Instead of unconsciously receiving mental, vital or other vibrations which unknown to us will shape our life and which we naively take for our own, we say this is my anger, my depression, my sexual obsession, my fever. We begin to see them coming to us. This is visible proof, supported by hundreds of experiences night after night, that the whole play of our frontal nature originates outside ourselves in a universal mind, a universal vital, or even in higher regions we are capable of tuning into. And it is the beginning of mastery, because once we have seen and even foreseen, we can alter the course of circumstances. Earthly life is simultaneously the place of most rigorous and most blinding determinism and of conquered freedom. All depends on our consciousness. The less conscious we are, the more we are bound. The more conscious we are, the more we are free. A disciple once wrote to Sri Aurobindo relating his dreams and the sort of bizarre coincidence between nighttime and daytime events. Here is the answer he received. Sri Aurobindo's words: understand that these experiences are not mere imaginations or dreams, but actual happenings. Not to say that everything we dream is an actual happening, but what this person wrote to Sri Aurobindo said, it's an experience. It is a mistake to think that we live physically only with the outer mind and life. We are all the time living and acting on other planes of consciousness, meeting others there and acting upon them. And what we do and feel and think there, the forces we gather, the results we prepare, have an incalculable importance and effect unknown to us upon our outer life. Not all of it comes through, and what comes through takes another form in the physical, though sometimes there is an exact correspondence. But this little is at the basis of our outward existence. All that we become and do and bear in the physical life is prepared behind the veil within us. It is therefore of immense importance for a yoga which aims at transformation of life to grow conscious of what goes on within these domains, to be master there and to be able to feel, know and deal with secret forces that determine our destiny and our internal and external growth. So growth or decline. So Mother's written extensively about being conscious, about this formation in my waking state comes from the vital, this mental, which plane are we functioning from in our waking state? Eventually we have to become equally conscious in our sleep state. We should know that this dream is from the mental plane, this is from the vital plane, this is from the subconscious, this is a real experience, it's not from any of these. At night, when the bond of the body and the tyranny of the mental chatter are no longer there, this independence becomes remarkably alive. The little vibrations that we have accreted and which constitute our nature break up into little beings of our being which run here and there. So we have a vital personality, a mental personality, which appear to be one person in our waking state. But when we fall asleep, they sort of get scattered and each personality comes up in our dream state. We discover in us all sorts of strangers whose existence we had never suspected. In other words, these fragments are not integrated around the true center, the psychic. And since they are not integrated, we have no power over them. And we are unable to alter the course of circumstances. So, Satprem draws a very real comparison between sleep and death. So, he says that when you die, your mental being disintegrates and goes into the universal mental plane. Your vital or emotional being disintegrates and goes into the universal vital plane. The physical body goes into the earth and the psychic goes to the psychic plane, and what's reborn is the psychic. So, if some part of your vital being has been annexed into the psychic, if you have built a real bridge between the psychic being, none of you are new to mother's lingo, right? All of you are familiar with all these terms, great. You're new to it. So the psychic being, you're new to it too. The psychic, see, Sri Aurobindo says that we are not one monolithic being. We are an amalgam of many beings which have their own personality. So there's a mental being in the realm of thoughts, there's a vital being in the realm of emotions, there's a physical being which has its own physical consciousness, and the psychic being is the portion of the divine within us, a portion of our soul which evolves lifetime to lifetime. And if we haven't built conscious bridges between our mental and the psychic being which after death goes to the psychic world, that part of our vital won't go forward with us. Only what's sort of integrated into the psychic will be reborn with us in the next birth. So all the labor we've done to progress in these domains, if we haven't integrated it around the psychic being and into the psychic being, it won't really give us a flavor in our next birth. So also in our dreams. So this is about death, but sleep is a kind of death, right? So also if we are in a vital world in our sleep and the vital being hasn't been integrated around the psychic, we'll be open to attacks. But if the vital being has been integrated around the psychic, the moment the attack comes, even in our dream, we'll say the word Ma, or we'll say Om or something, and the whole nature of the dream will change. Similarly, if we haven't built a bridge between our mental and our psychic, and we have dreams on that plane, the light of the psychic can't come because we haven't built that bridge. So if we live during the day integrating ourselves around the psychic being, we build those bridges during our waking state. They naturally come to our rescue when we sleep. And vice versa. Yeah, if you build those bridges in your sleep, they come in your waking state. The necessity of integration soon becomes apparent if we want to be master not only here but there and in every way. For instance, we leave our body and go into certain regions of the lower vital corresponding to the area of the navel and sex centers. The higher vital is here, the lower vital is here. The part of our being that is exteriorized in this domain most often goes through the very unpleasant experiences. It's attacked by all sorts of voracious forces, and we have what is conventionally called a nightmare from which we escape by rushing back as fast as we can into our body where we are sheltered. But just think about it, when you die and you don't have the option of rushing back into your body, what would happen to you if you haven't lived consciously and you haven't connected with the light? So it's very important to live consciously. This birth is very precious. Every moment counts. It shouldn't be wasted. Now, if this particular part of our being has consented to be integrated around the psychic center, it can go safely out into these rather infernal, hellish regions because it is armed with the psychic light. The psychic is a light, a fragment of the great original light. And when attacked, one only needs to remember this light or the master, which is the same thing, for all the adverse forces to be scattered. By remembering, it calls to the true vibration, which has the power to dissolve or disperse all vibrations of lesser intensity. So a higher vibration doesn't have to fight a lower vibration. The moment, this we did last Savitri class if you heard it, if a higher vibration arises, the very fact of its arising, the lower vibration dissolves. It's like there's darkness in a room. The moment you switch on the light doesn't have to fight darkness. The darkness can't exist. So the moment you've tuned into a higher vibration, there's no fight. The lower vibration dream simply dissolves. By remembering, it calls to the true vibration which has the power to dissolve all vibrations of lesser intensity. There is even quite an instructive transitional stage in which we are the helpless spectator of terrifying chases, for instance, until in its distress, this fragment of ourselves suddenly remembers the light and the situation is reversed. So this reminds me of a very interesting dream I had when I didn't even know the mother. I was 18 or 19 and I didn't know mother existed, but I'm sharing this just to tell you that even when we don't know about our masters are looking after us right from the time we are born. So in my dream, as said, there was a black animal chasing me and I'm running and running and running. And then suddenly I see this lady high up. She's in full white with a veil over her face and she's holding something. And I'm not walking towards her, but she's like a magnet and I'm just being pulled towards her. And I'm thinking that this one has a gift for me in my dream. And I opened my eyes. And now in hindsight, I do feel it was the mother who was watching over me even then when I didn't consciously know of her. And it's significant that in my dream, I didn't know where she was, so I couldn't walk towards her. But she knew where I was and like a magnet, she was pulling me to her. So yeah, things like that happen and it's really beautiful to remember that whether we remember our masters or not, they never stop remembering us and they look after us lifetime after lifetime. So, on these planes, we may also meet all sorts of people, known or unknown, near or distant, living or dead. The ever living whom we name as dead, as Sri Aurobindo puts it, who are on the same wavelength. And we may be the witness or helpless partner of their misadventures, which may translate for the living into unhappy happenings on earth. As we know, every blow dealt there is a blow dealt here. Every occurrence there prepares an occurrence here. But if at that time of the experience, this fragment of ourselves, which is with the corresponding fragment of this friend, this stranger or dead person remembers the light. That is, if it is integrated around the psychic. You'll only remember it if the plane in which this dream is happening, that has a bridge to the psychic. It can reverse the course of circumstances, help a friend or stranger in distress, help a disembodied being to go through a difficult passage or get out of a dangerous place, or free itself from unhealthy associations. We will give only one example here, deliberately choosing it as negative and commonplace as possible. X dreams she is walking with a friend along the edge of a pond whose waters appear to be marvelously clear, when suddenly a snake springs up from the bottom of the pond and bites her friend at the throat. She makes several attempts to protect her friend but becomes frightened herself, and pursued in turn by the snake, runs back home into her body. The next day she learns that her friend is ill and has completely lost her voice. She herself is pursued the whole day by a series of small abortive accidents, inner and outer. If she had been actively conscious and centered, nothing would have happened, and the adverse force would have fled. There are, on the other hand, instances in which accidents were miraculously averted because they were overcome the previous night by a conscientious friend, if not by herself. So this girl dreams that a snake has bitten her friend's throat and she herself is running, and the next day the friend has a sore throat and she is pursued by, so something had happened on another plane, and if she had changed it in her dream, if she had called on the mother to take away the snake or whatever, all this could have been averted. But for that, the key to everything is consciousness. She was unconscious. That's what lucid dreaming is. If you know it's a dream, you can change it. But if you don't know and you're unconscious, you get lost in it. Huh? Like life, exactly. Thus, we can usefully participate in all kinds of activities that prepare our personal tomorrows or vaster tomorrows, depending on our capacities. A conscious being no larger than a man's thumb stands in the center of our self. He is the master of the past and present. He is today and he is tomorrow, says the Katha Upanishad. This is the psychic being. A conscious being no larger than a man's thumb in the heart. We need to have had numerous experiences, verifying them whenever possible, before we understand to what extent these dreams are not dreams. Certain imprisonments here cannot be undone until we have undone them there. The problem of action is thus linked with that of integration. This integration is all the more indispensable because we no longer have a body. That is, when we are supposedly dead, those fragments no longer have recourse to rushing back into the body for shelter. If they have not been integrated, they suffer a great deal of unpleasantness, which is why prayers for our loved ones are so important. If they have not consciously died, there's sometimes a lot of suffering on the vital plane. But if a loved one is very consciously praying for the first 4-5 days when they are making transitions, it greatly helps them. But of course, a conscious being doesn't need prayers of anyone. His own consciousness is his greatest strength. And Mother's beautifully written that she and Sri Aurobindo have been working a lot to build a bridge from this world to the next, so that connected to them, people don't pass through vital worlds. They just remember them and their transition is easy. for the lower planes, notably the lower vital, are peopled with ravenous forces. As a young Pondicherry disciple who had died prematurely put it when he came to tell of his journey to a friend during the latter's sleep, just behind your world there is no law and order. Just behind our waking state world there is no law and order. And he added, I had with me the light of the mother and I crossed over. Since this experience is typical of many deaths, we should perhaps add that the meeting of the two friends took place in the higher vital region corresponding to the heart center, amid the beautiful colored gardens one often finds there, which constitute one of the countless so-called heavens of the other world indeed, low-ceilinged heavens. Generally, the disembodied being remains there as long as he wishes, then when he has had enough, goes with his soul to the place of true rest in the original light and waits there for the time to return. To say that someone goes to eternal hell is a cruel absurdity. How could the soul, this light, ever be a prisoner of those low vibrations? So we have an assurance that you'll go through this, but finally the light that you are will return to the light which is the source. We may as well say that infrared is the master of ultraviolet if we are saying that the soul can be a prisoner of those low vibrations. Like goes with like, always and everywhere, here or elsewhere. And in truth, what could be eternal except the soul, except joy? If there were an unending hell, Sri Aurobindo says, it could only be a seat of unending rapture, for God is Ananda, and the eternity of his bliss, and other than the eternity of his bliss, there is no other eternity. For example, when we see an event in the subtle physical which borders our world, its earthly transcription is almost immediate. Subtle physical is usually when our waking state, we wake up going through the subtle physical and then physical. So whatever dreams we have just before waking up, they are very close to our earth reality. Those are dreams in the subtle physical, and they often have some truth or something, but not always. Don't make anything a blanket rule. For example, when we see an event in the subtle physical which borders our earth, its earthly transcription is almost immediate. A few hours or a day later, we see an accident, and the next day we meet with the accident. And the vision is very precise down to the smallest detail. The higher we rise on the scale of consciousness, the further ahead the accomplishment of the vision and the more universal its scope, but the less precise the details of its implementation, as though the facts seen were indeed inevitable, but with a margin of uncertainty in the modalities. That means if we are, the more conscious we are, the more precise the details we'll see. The less conscious we are, the more distorted it will be, but it will have some bearing on reality. All kinds of interesting conclusions can be drawn from this observation, in particular the fact that the more conscious we are on earth, that is, the higher we can rise on the scale of consciousness, the nearer we can come to the origin, and nearer too we bring the earth to the origin by cancelling the distorting determinisms of the intermediary planes. This can have considerable consequences not only in an individual sense for the mastery and transformation of our own life, but also in a general sense for the transformation of the world. The problem of freedom and determinism has given rise to much discussion, but in a wrong perspective. There is no freedom or determinism, but freedom and a number of determinisms. Very beautiful. So determinism, it's the question, is there fate, is there free will? Fate is predetermined, freedom is free will. So what he's saying is, it's not a question of either or, it's not a question of fate or free will, freedom or determinism, but freedom and a number of determinism. So have any of you seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? No? Oh, you must watch it. It's delightful. It's available on YouTube. So there is a scene where this boy is in a quantum football field, and he's telling the protagonist Amanda to enter that field, and he's bouncing a ball, and the ball is being bounced in many infinite positions, and he tells her, these are the possibilities of the ball bouncing, and whatever you choose will be pulled into existence. You understand what I'm saying? There are many possibilities, but depending on the consciousness you have, you will think a possibility. Thinking a possibility is choosing it into existence. So the more conscious you are, like in lucid dreaming, you can even choose your dreams. That's another level of freedom. But in a waking state, you can choose what will happen depending on your consciousness. For example, mother says, suppose you're supposed to have an accident and you have a consciousness of complete surrender, you don't have an iota of fear, the accident can be averted. I've said this story many times in the Savitri class of the plane crash. You know what I'm talking about. Of a person who just remembered the mother while a plane was about to crash, and the whole plane crash was averted. And the mother said that your surrender to me was so complete that my force could act completely and change the collective karma of everyone on the plane. But in the face of an accident, if I'm scared, fear will invite its own whatever, but at least I'm scared and I pray to the mother. Then I will get wounded, but I won't die, I can recover. And if I don't even pray and I'm just consumed by fear, anything can happen. So these are possibilities, but depending on my consciousness, one of those possibilities gets chosen into existence. And this is true for anything. Forget an accident, an argument you're having, anything. If you keep vibrating at that level of anger and whatever, the outcome is what it's always been. But if in the middle of an argument, you shift your consciousness, you remember the mother, you bring peace into you, the whole outcome changes. It's true for everything. That's what I keep saying, and I re-emphasize. We human beings don't use the one leverage that is the most important. I said this even last class, I'm saying it again. The lever is consciousness. A lever is a simple machine that makes a difficult task easy. That's the physics definition of a lever, right? We have many difficult tasks on hand, and we will struggle and we'll do donkey's labor, but we won't use the one leverage all of us have as our birthright, which is consciousness. We don't take the trouble to cultivate that consciousness, to draw from it. So just in this experiment with surrender, Michael Singer had an exam to give, but he was so into his practices that he hadn't studied anything and he didn't even want to give the exam. But it was his experiment with surrender. When his professor asked him to give the exam, he had to say yes, because that was part of his experiment. Otherwise, he was going to drop out. He was fully into this path. And then just one day before the exam, he meditated 3 hours and he said, I'm just going to open the book and study 3 things that open at random. And he did that, put it away, went back to meditation. Out of the 6 questions, 3 of them were exactly what he'd opened to. Now, I'm not advising you do that as students. He could do that because he had invested that much into consciousness. So he reaped that much reward. But the more you invest into consciousness, to that level you will reap rewards. So, this also. So, in our microcosm, for instance, good physical health and a given longevity can be altered by the vital determinism of our passions and our disorderly life, which can in turn be altered by the mental determinism of our will and ideal, which means our physical consciousness may have a determinism of a good healthy life. But if our vital is destructive, easily disturbed, that may interfere with the determinism of the physical. And again, a mental which is nicely ordered may further interfere with the So it's all these planes interacting together which finally determine the outcome, which can be altered by the mental determinism of our will and ideal, which can be altered by the greater law of the psychic, and so on. Freedom means moving to a higher plane, and the same applies to the destiny of the earth. It's the same forces that move the microcosm that the macrocosm alike. If we, who are more than anything else the insertion point of all these determinisms into matter. So the Buddha said that if you study of the 5 feet of your human body, you study the whole universe. Because this body is the whole universe. All the planes of consciousness are inserted into this body. Do you understand this sentence? What he's saying is that we are more than anything else the insertion point of all these determinisms into matter, are capable of rising to a higher plane of consciousness. We automatically help alter all the lower determinisms and give earth access to a greater freedom until the day when, as we shall see through pioneers of evolution, we will be capable of rising to a supramental plane which will alter the present destiny of the world as the mind did towards the close of the tertiary. And in the end, if at all there is an end, the earth will perhaps reach the supreme determinism, which is supreme freedom. Supreme determinism is the determinism of the psychic, which is supreme freedom and perfect accomplishment. Through our work on consciousness, each of us contributes to resisting the fatalities that weigh on the world and is a ferment for the earth's freedom and its divinization. For evolution of consciousness has a terrestrial sense. So we stop here. Let's end with a little meditation we can do just before sleeping to make us sleep conscious. We will put it up as a little short video also. You can play it and you can sleep to it. Okay? So let's just sit still. And let's just recollect the importance of conscious sleep. To sum it up, the Mother and Sri Aurobindo tell us that whatever state of mind we fall asleep in multiplies in our sleep. Whatever plane of consciousness, mental, vital, physical, psychic, we are connected to, at the moment we fall asleep, we'll have dreams on that plane. And if we have built a bridge in our waking state between the psychic or the soul and that particular plane of consciousness, then even in our dreams, the psychic can act on that plane. And why is that action important? Because at night when we go to these planes, often we get a glimpse of things which are going to be passed on to the earthly plane. And if we are conscious, we can get great guidance from our dreams. And if we are even more conscious and we have lucid dreaming capacities, capacities to change our dreams by calling on the Master when in a dark spot or otherwise, or just becoming aware, this is a dream, I want to change it, which is very possible, then we actually avert negative outcomes on the earth plane. Also, a lot of the health we experience in our waking state is dependent on the dreams we've had in our sleep state. Some dreams are rejuvenating and health giving, and certain dreams, especially the ones that come up from the subconscious, can actually bring out illnesses which can be averted if we learn to deal with them. So if we are clear of the importance of working on our dreams at night, first we put a paper and pen next to our bedside with the intention that whenever we wake up, we won't move, we will lie still as if we are looking at a clear blue lake without a ripple. And we'll try to recollect the dreams we've just had. We'll say the dreams over and over again in our mind so that we remember them. Then we write them down and we go back to sleep if we've woken up, maybe to go to the loo or whatever else. So if this is done many times during the night, we get glimpses into different planes that we travel to in our sleep. Now, to clear our mind space before we sleep. The most powerful light in the world is the Mother's light. So, consciously put your right hand at the center of your chest, left palm over it. Go deep into your heart space, nothing to do with your physical organ heart. The center of your consciousness, the psychic being, the part of the Divine Mother within us. So you can visualize her in any form or just a sun inside you. And just breathe, inhaling, going deeper and deeper within. Inviting this light to spill up as we inhale to the top of our head. Exhale, spill around us like a womb of white light. An apple-shaped three-dimensional fountain rising up from the Sahasrara, the top chakra, and curving into the Mooladhara between your thighs. Inhale. Mother is the source of that fountain of white light. Let that white light rise up to the top of your head and spill all around you like an apple-shaped fountain. And once that fountain is well secreted, go to sleep with a feeling of this bubble of light around you. With a prayer to the Mother, even as you're lying down, Mother, I want to be conscious in my sleep. Exert a will. Make me conscious in my sleep. Let me remember my dreams. Protect me in my sleep. And please help me to build the bridges in my sleep between different planes of consciousness and your presence in me, which is the psychic being. Let your force take up the sadhana even in my sleep. Make me conscious of your presence in my sleep. And even if I wake up before going back to sleep in course of the night, you be my thought, The last thought before I fall asleep. And then as you lie down, taking deep breaths, tuning into that bubble of light around you, as far as possible, light and the mother being the last thought as you fall asleep. That's important. The last thought with which you fall asleep determines the rest of your night. Just the way the state of mind you die in, you breathe your last, determines your next birth. Folding your hands together in a namaste at the heart. Take a long, slow inhalation. Breathe out with Om. So there'll be no class next weekend. I'm traveling. We'll meet Saturday after next. And those of you who are new, in case you want to be added to our Savitri WhatsApp group where recordings and all are posted, that's Bijal. Give her your number, she'll add you to the group.